That's the start of that. So where'd you go to high school at?
Yeah, I went to high school in Hillsboro
Why did you get into dental field?
because my father was a dentist.
He practiced on you?
Yeah. My dad was a dentist, and I have it written in my baby book. I have my baby book that my mom kept for me, and in my baby book, when I was 5 years old, I said I want to be a dentist. But of course, my dad was a dentist, but that's why. And why did I go into the Coast Guard? Because my dad, while he was in dental school, got drafted during World War II, and it was 40, I think, well, when did the war break out? It was over. It was over about 43, right?
Yep.
So in about 1940, he was getting ready to graduate from dental school, and he got drafted, and so he joined the Army. So he was a dentist in the Army during the end of World War II. And because of that, he kept telling me all about these great stories about being in the service and how much he learned about dentistry while he was in the service. So I thought that would be a good idea, and I did research and ended up going into the Coast Guard.
How many are you familiar with the Coast Guard? You know, most of it
Was he from McPherson? So does anybody know there was a commander from McPherson that was in the Coast Guard? He was stationed the same place I was. He was stationed in at New York City the same time I was. Yes, that was his name. Where does he live now, or is he gone? Oh yeah, Gary Cosby. And I went to a party, and I walked by a license plate that said McPherson, Kansas. So I had to find out who it was. That was Gary Cosby. Thank you for. I was hoping somebody would remember his name.
I got to thinking about the Coast Guard, and I thought, well, probably the only reason Doc went to the Coast Guard so he could learn to swim. I don't know if that was really true or not, but anyhow.
Well, let me share, first of all, the thing that I wanted to share most of all is that along with Dennis and a few other guys that I'm golf friends with, started talking to me about going on the honor flight. And so it's been, was it a year ago that we went, or?
When was that, Danny? About a year ago? Yeah.
So Mr. Schaefer back there told me it was a year.
Danny.
So anyway, so I really I wasn't prepared for it mentally, and I was so. It started off with I showed Danny the video I had, and it's when we got to Washington D.C. There was about 25 or 30 people that were waiting for us to get off our flight, and we walked in and they were all clapping and cheering. The whole airport was, and I just kind of like I got emotional, and I was that way the whole time I was on the honor flight. It was very, very honoring, and I felt so welcoming. Sometimes you forget about, the role that you play when you're in the service. And so I was in the Coast Guard right at the end of the Vietnam War. And so some of my friends that I learned to know have, told me about stuff that had gone on and what they were doing. The Coast Guard, I would say the majority of you who know about the Coast Guard know about the search and rescue. And that's what we're known for. When people get lost in sea and stuff, the Coast Guard is the first to do search and rescue. The second thing that they're very, very big on is aids to navigation. And that's what they helped a lot with during World War II and during the Vietnam War. They know all the waters, where the depths of the water are, where you have to be careful. They know the routes, so they actually they're sort of like the highway patrolmen and the highway keepers for the ocean. They know what paths to take, where it's safe to go, the water currents, what areas to stick away from, because that's their part. That's what the Coast Guard does, and they have buoys and lighthouses and things like that where they let people know where the best place to sail is. The third thing is, and you've just been hearing about it recently, is law enforcement in the water. they watch for drugs in the water and for any illegal fishing that goes on. So I was telling Dennis, I had kind of a bi story. So when my dad was in the army, he was a Mennonite, so he knew German. And when he was stationed in Dallas, they brought in a whole bunch of German prisoners. And my dad spoke German, and so he could speak to all these guys, and it kind of was a good role for my dad. Not only did he do dentistry on some of them, but he got to talk to them and kind of help them with homesickness and stuff. So then when I was in the Coast Guard, I was on an island in New York, and one of the things we did was arrest people that were illegal fishing in our waters. So I got up one morning and I look out, and there's a Russian fishing boat parked right outside my apartment. Just looking right here. You can imagine what a fishing ship looks like that's been out in the ocean. It's got all this stuff. And I go, what in the world is that boat doing here? And I get to work, and my 10 o'clock appointment was a Russian sailor. They had gotten arrested for illegal fishing in New York, off of New York Harbor, and one of them had a toothache. So I pulled the tooth on a Russian sailor.
He pulled it. He wasn't going to hold back.
So I thought that was very funny. I kind of related that to the story that my dad had. He worked on German soldiers, and I worked on a Russian. And then the other things that the Coast Guard does is they man everything that's in the ocean, and so they have very fast boats. They have a 400-foot cutter, and guess what powers that cutter? 2 jet engines. I read about it. I knew about it, so I read up on it. They have 2 jet engines, are the same kind of jet engine that they use on airplanes, big jet engines. And they can do something that regular boats can't do, and that is they have brakes. And so the Navy and the Coast Guard was doing some maneuvers, and the Navy ship was parked here, and the Coast Guard boat was supposed to come in and line up and be equal with them. The Coast Guard came in on purpose. On purpose, they came in fast. And all the Navy sailors were up there laughing that the Coast Guard was going to sail right past them. And when they got into position, they reversed their jet engines and put on the brakes and stopped. And the Navy had never seen that before. But so they have very, very fast boats because they're, they go after, they're able to. And then the last thing I'm going to share about the Vietnam is that I would say, less than 20% of what the Coast Guard does is what we think of as military. But they do help a lot because of aids to navigation, which they did in Vietnam a lot. And then they had a lot of fast boats that went into the Mekong Delta and some of those areas. The Coast Guard was used a lot in the Coast Guard. We had 8,000 Coast Guard guys were stationed in the Coast Guard in Vietnam at the end of the Vietnam War. So, any questions about the Coast Guard? Oh, really?
I knew that was coming. While he's reversing his memory here, I got a couple of things I'll read on here. It says, I asked him when the Coast Guard was established, and he didn't have an idea. Didn't have a clue. I didn't either, but so I looked it up. 28 January 1915.
Well,
76 years ago. They still had floating boats 76 years ago. That's amazing. There's 40,000.
No, that's got to be 2000 and 1915.
Yep.
Would be 115 years ago.
76 years ago.
110 years ago.
Okay.
That's when my dad was born. So that's the year my dad was born, 1915.
The Coast Guard's got 40,819 active duty members at this time. That's a lot. Then I like this one. The Coast Guard is often seen as academically stronger than the Marines. Academically, but not physically. So we got to make sure we get that set up there. And then on a typical day in the Coast Guard, they average 15 lives they save in one day. That's a typical day. That's not when the push comes to shove. They conduct 90 search and rescues in one day. They assist 117 people on a SOS or stress. They seize $21 million worth of illegal drugs a day. That's in a typical day. They have 122 board and inspect vessels. They check boats out all the time. Then they got 2,557 that monitor the transit of the 257 commercial ships going back and forth. So the Coast Guard's checking everything as they come and go. So they're in on the drug war as well. So anything else, Doc?
No, I think that's it.
You got more questions? Hey, I got a question. Did you ever learn to swim?
I did learn how to swim in high school.
Oh, okay. Shoot. Any questions? Bill? Yeah.
One of my best friends, when I was stationed, one of my best friends graduated from there.
So, we don't hear much about the Coast Guard because out in Kansas there isn't a big demand for Coast Guard boats.
Well, so when you're talking about the smartest or whatever, when I was looking into what branch of the service to go into to be a dentist, I found that it was the hardest to get into the Coast Guard. They were very particular, and that was a benefit for us because when the Coast Guard guys would come in to see us, they would say, we hear you're the best dentist in the service. You're better than the Army dentist and the Navy dentist. So that kind of was a benefit for us.
So you made everybody happy all the time? Anything else?
Thank you all for your service.
Bill, got some more.
University of Missouri in Kansas City. That I was going to share that.
Bingo.
Where did I get my training? I was a civilian. I walked in the door. They handed me my uniform, and they told me who to salute and who was supposed to salute me. And I was in the service. Because they took me as a in the medical corps, and you don't have any training. I went in as a dentist. Yes, I went in as a lieutenant commander. Well, that's what I left. I left as a lieutenant commander. Anything else?
Bill.
I should be able to answer that question only for the reason is that I was stationed on a training center. At the center I was at, they had all the schools for all the search and rescue and buoy tending and all that. All of those schools were on my base, but I can't answer that. I'm sure it's a difficult thing, and they go by experience. There's always somebody experienced that goes with them on search and rescue. I went on one search and rescue. I happened to be I went with a friend, and we were on a helicopter, and they were showing around the base, and all of a sudden they got a notification that there was a boat that was sinking. And so we took off and dropped somebody down, and were able to. I was just an observant of when somebody was rescued, but that's a very cool memory I have.
Any more questions?
Well, thank you guys all for the service that you did for.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Appreciate
it. For America.
Hey, when I asked Richard if he wanted to come up and speak, he said no. And I thought, Richard, I know you better than that. And it's been a fact that when you get somebody up here and start talking, their brain starts to swinging, and they start talking about things that happened, and they go on, which is what this is all about. Because most of the time you don't get to hear anything from anybody unless you corner them for it. So if you know anybody that's willing to speak, please let me know. So, okay, thank you very much.